If you're anything like me, you probably hate HOAs. So you want to leave the city and move onto your own land that you control with no HOA interference. But there's a problem. Without an HOA, how do you know your rights are protected when a neighbor wants to run a commercial trucking business next door, or blast music all night, or spray toxic chemicals that drift onto your land, or turn their parcel into an unsightly landfill that ruins the value of your property no matter what you build? Well, for that, we need to write down rules that we can all agree on. Once we have those rules, we can make sure our peace remains protected. The problem is, how do you write rules that preserve liberty instead of restricting it? Because remember, we left HOA world to create our own world of freedom. Well, you write a Bill of Rights, a covenant designed to protect good families, not control them. A standard that you can use to settle conflicts with those neighbors, whether it's now, 5 years from now, or 500 years from now. We call that Bill of Rights for a property our deed restrictions. And it's what we use at Access Centralized Real Estate to settle conflicts and protect our mission. For context, my name is TJ Visiude, and I'm the founder and CEO of Access Centralized Real Estate. We turn 500-acre properties into 5 to 15-acre parcels of land meant for entrepreneurial, faith-based families that want to move into their own off-grid regenerative family compounds. On each of our parcels, our families expect to have their own deed to their property, so they own it outright, family compound with multiple homes for themselves, their parents, their children, their friends, and even Airbnb guests, fully off-grid utilities, including off-grid solar, off-grid wells, and off-grid septic, a regenerative ranching operation that rotates livestock across the backyards of each parcel, and most importantly, no HOA. Let me repeat that: we have no HOA. So these deed restrictions are the covenant agreements that protect families from others who would want to subvert the goals of our communities. For example, in Texas, we acquired 492 acres of land and turned it into 40 individual parcels for 40 different families. In Florida, we acquired a 1,135 acre ranch and turned it into 100 parcels for 100 families. In Tennessee, we have 922 acres that we're turning into 140 parcels. And in California, we are acquiring 640 acres and turning it into over 50 individual homesteading parcels for these families. In general, we're expanding from just 2 properties in 2024 to over 12 properties and over 500 parcel owners by March 1st, 2026, because we see the dire need that exists for families who want this type of lifestyle. But here's a new question and a new problem that presents itself. If we're going to expand to that many people, what if there's room for these new people to misinterpret our deed restrictions? What if someone could come in and reinterpret them differently than they were intended? We see it all the time with our own Bill of Rights. For example, most people have no clue what the right to bear arms means. Family Guy has a funny joke about it where they have James Madison says, yeah, the right to bear arms means the right to hang bear arms on your wall. So to account for that, imagine if you could watch a video of James Madison reading the Bill of Rights to you with commentary on what each line really means, why it was written, how it still matters today, and what to do to prevent major changes. Wouldn't that change everything in our entire country? Well, that is what we have here today. Welcome to the Axe Deed Restrictions 2025. Again, my name is TJ Visuday, and I'm the founder and CEO of Axe Decentralized Real Estate. This video is a word-for-word reading of the Axe Deeded Property Restrictions Agreement, the same agreement every Axe buyer signs before becoming an official landowner. And my goal for making this video is simple. It's to give you a living, recorded interpretation of the deed restrictions through audio, video, written word, and most importantly, body language, so you know what they mean, not just what they say. With this video, you or your children can reference each deed restriction now or years from now as a guide, a standard, and a reminder with living meaning. This is my daughter, Riley, and I think about Riley growing up to my age, being able to watch this in the future and understand, wow, I understand what Dad was saying all the way back then. So watch this video all the way through. Do not skip even a single part. This is essential viewing if you're determining whether Axe is right for you as an investor, as a property owner, or as an employee. And you're going to learn a lot about our community by understanding all of the freedoms we are protecting with these deed restrictions. Plus, as a bonus, I really made sure to include nice little pictures and diagrams and stories. This is the only time that I've ever seen a CEO of a company read the fine print of his contracts, and B, that reading the fine print of a contract is going to feel very, very fun. You get to discuss each one of these points with your family members because we're talking about a lot of important philosophical matters. So again, watch this video all the way through to the end. Plus, you can access the documents. You can download the full PDF of the deed restrictions and this video presentation directly from our website by going to axdreal.com and clicking the button that says deed restrictions. You just hit the menu and you click deed restrictions. It's very obvious. It's very easy. So with that being the case, let's dive in. Again, I'm going to read out every single piece that is on our contract, and what you see here on these slides is verbatim what you're going to see in the actual deed restriction agreement. There is no changes. It is very, very simply exact what you see. It's very simply what you see is what you are going to get. All right, let's start off with the purpose of these deeded property restrictions. The purpose of these deeded property restrictions is, number one, to claim the land as part of God's kingdom, a haven where families can cultivate, nurture, and build as stewards of His creation. Number two, to safeguard the land as a sacred inheritance, preserving its beauty, fertility, and integrity for generations to come. Number three, protect families from actions that would diminish their peace, security, health, property value, or rightful enjoyment of their homesteads. Number four, to promote wise regenerative stewardship of the land, water, animals, and natural resources under the care of each owner. Number five, to ensure architectural harmony, encouraging creativity, craftsmanship, and diversity of design while preventing negligent, disproportionate, or disorderly development. Number six, it's to preserve the spirit of the Axe community, rooted in faith, family, freedom, neighborliness, and a shared commitment to building a self-sustaining, God-honoring refuge for you, your family, your friends, and your guests. Number seven, it's to maintain lawful order and mutual accountability, resolving conflicts through biblical standards of reconciliation, not bureaucratic courts or external interference. And finally, number eight, to defend the long-term value, dignity, and purpose of the Axe community against exploitation, industrialization, and ideological subversion. To put it simply, these restrictions exist not merely to regulate land use, but to protect a covenant, a calling, and most importantly, a way of life. Biblical and ethical foundations of these restrictions. These deeded property restrictions are not arbitrary. They are grounded in higher principles that transcend human contracts and personal preferences. The most important source for these deed restrictions is the Word of God, rooted in the full counsel of Scripture, from Genesis to Revelation, with the Berean Standard Bible, BSB, and the New King James Version, NKJV, as the primary references. Number 2, the red letters of Christ. Wisdom drawn directly from the spoken words of Jesus himself in the Bible, recorded as direct quotations in the New Testament as red letter text without external interpretation. 3, the law of reconciliation. The red letter direct commands quoted from Christ for resolving disputes, rooted in the covenantal laws of Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 19, and fulfilled through the process outlined in Matthew 18, lines 15 through 18, anchored by the command to practice the golden rule, Matthew 7:12. So let's read the law of reconciliation handed to us by Jesus himself without outside interpretation. If your brother sins against you, go and confront him privately. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take 1 or 2 others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, regard him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. The next influence is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We also have some principles that aren't directly quoted from the Bible, but they are still important philosophical principles. We have the non-aggression principle, the moral truth that no one has the right to initiate harm against another person's life, liberty, or property. And finally, the right to self-defense, affirmed throughout Scripture and nature, recognizing that defending oneself, one's family, and one's home is not only permitted, but righteous. If we look at every single deed restriction that we have, they all point to this. They point to the words of the Bible, to the words of Christ, to the law of reconciliation, to the golden rule, to the non-aggression principle, and to the right to self-defense. Every single point is either aggression or harm or theft that was caused by another, and self-defense to prevent that aggression and harm initiated by another from spreading throughout the entire community. So let's go to section 1, use of the property. Use of the property. The property may be primarily used for agricultural and or residential purposes only. That is the primary use of every axe homestead. Strict commercial or industrial activity is prohibited unless it is specifically permitted elsewhere in these restrictions, or it receives written approval from acts, or it is approved by a majority vote of at least 75% of the property owners present at a properly noticed community meeting because it aids the spirit of the community. 1.1, ministry, homeschooling, and family-centered activities. Owners are encouraged to use their land for purposes such as faith-based gatherings, home education, small ministries, food production, regenerative stewardship, and family-centered businesses, provided these activities uphold the spirit of the Acts community and do not create a nuisance or public hazard. Small family businesses operated from the home or farm. Small businesses are permitted so long as they remain clearly secondary to the residential or agricultural use of the land and do not create excessive traffic, nuisance, or the atmosphere of a commercial district. 1.3, hunting and wildlife stewardship. Property owners may hunt wild game for personal use only, not for commercial purposes, provided it is done lawfully, responsibly, and with respect for the land, the animals, and fellow owners. Standards for ethical hunting. All hunting must be conducted with proper regard for neighbor safety, maintaining appropriate distance from homes, roads, and shared areas. All hunting must comply with state and local laws. Hunting must be conducted in a way that preserves wildlife populations and supports ecological health for future generations. Overhunting, reckless slaughter, or actions that would decimate animal populations or impair others' ability to hunt responsibly are strictly prohibited. Commercial hunting leases, guide services, or for-profit hunting operations are not allowed without prior written approval from ACTS and or a 75% majority vote of the ACTS community. The ACTS community stands for ethical provision, wise stewardship, and mutual respect, not careless exploitation of God's creation. Violations of these hunting standards may result in loss of privileges, community-imposed sanctions, or legal action if necessary to protect the land and its wildlife. 1.4. Firearms training and preparation. The right to own, train with, and responsibly use firearms for personal defense, family protection, food provision, and community preparedness is fully recognized and protected within the ACTS community. Standards for responsible firearm use. Firearms training must be conducted with full respect for neighbor safety, noise limitations, and community standards outlined in these restrictions. Structured training, private instruction, and controlled marksmanship events are permitted and encouraged. Firearms use must be intentional, disciplined, and skill-focused, not reckless, casual, or disruptive. Open range, sustained free-for-all shooting that creates excessive noise or disturbance is prohibited unless conducted during scheduled and approved training sessions. The ACTS community upholds the principles of self-defense, family protection, and lawful preparedness as sacred rights, and expects all members to wield those rights with wisdom, discipline, and care. Let's go to section 2, structures and buildings. Your land is yours to build, but your build must honor the land. ACTS welcomes diversity of design, creativity of craftsmanship, and freedom of personal expression when it comes to building your home, barns, and outbuildings. However, all structures must meet basic standards of durability, aesthetics, and stewardship to preserve the value, beauty, and character of the entire community. The goal is not to impose strict uniformity, but to ensure that every building, whether a tiny cabin or a grand farmhouse, contributes to a landscape of strength, dignity, and enduring purpose. 2.1. Modular and manufactured homes. Modular and manufactured homes are allowed, but only if they're built to last and look the part. Only modular and manufactured homes that are no more than 3 years old at the time of installation are permitted. All such homes must be fully skirted within 90 days of placement to maintain visual integrity and protect the structure. Exception. Renovated homes that have been fully restored to like-new condition may be permitted and treated as new, subject to ACTS approval. 2.2. Mobile homes and unacceptable dwelling types. This land isn't for rusted trailers or makeshift RV setups. We're building something that lasts and looks the part. Mobile homes, trailers, or any other dwelling types that significantly diminish the value or appearance of the property or neighboring parcels are not permitted. Tiny homes on wheels are permitted only if they are professionally built and designed to look like real homes, not look like RVs, campers, buses, or temporary shelters. All such homes must be well-maintained, visually cohesive, and skirted or placed on a fixed foundation as appropriate, with trailering provisions removed from the structure, including tongues, tires, wheels, and roadway lighting. Here's some visual examples to understand what we're talking about. This is an example of a major no. This is the type of RV park we want to avoid at all costs. Permanent usage of an RV as the main residence. It's a no-no. You can see here, there's no skirting, and there's a big open hole to the side of the house that just remains open to the elements. That's a no. Here we have an example of poorly constructed materials throughout the entire house. Anything can come in and just blow it to the side. This is an almost. It's an amazing home design, but you can see at the bottom, it still has the tongue for the trailer. Another almost. Another great design, but it's missing a skirt for the siding right here for the wheels. Just add a little skirt so that you don't see the wheels anymore. Number 3 and 6 could be turned into approved designs by simply removing the tongue on the trailer and adding a fixed foundation to the design. Here's an example of approved designs. This is a family compound design with barns, greenhouses, and workshops. You can actually see that there's almost 5 different little structures there. Here's a beautiful tiny home design that suits as a starter build. This is an A-frame design, a modern build, a geodesic dome, and a 5-home villa. This is important. A lot of people think, oh, you can't build more than 3 homes. You can perfectly well build more than 3 homes in the areas, counties, or states that allow for it. 2.3, short-term rentals. Each parcel owner may choose up to 3 cabins, tents, yurts, or homes designated for short-term rental or guest lodging purposes. Note, this does not limit the total number of structures you may build on your land, only that no more than 3 may be publicly listed or operated as rentals at any given time in order to preserve the residential character of the community. So let's go back here for a second. Let's look at this 5-home villa. You can choose 3 out of these 5 homes and rent them out on Airbnb. Just choose 3 out of the 5. All rental units must be well-maintained and in good appearance, secondary to the primary residential or agricultural use of the land, and operated in a way that does not create excessive traffic, noise, or nuisance for the neighbors. 2.4, dilapidated homes and major structural damage. All residential buildings must be maintained in good, structurally sound conditions at all times. This applies only to major structural damage, such as large holes in the roof, as we see here. Holes in the walls or foundation that allow interior exposure to animals, weather, or trespassers. It does not apply to common cosmetic issues like a missing shingle or peeling paint, or to barns, ag buildings, or utility structures that came with the property or were built for rugged use. So for example, someone buys a parcel, the parcel happens to have a barn on it, the barn's 150 years old. That's not the issue that we're talking about here. We're talking about a haunted house like this that's just been sitting there for no reason, that is meant to be someone's actual house, except nobody's been living in the house for years. That's the problem that we're talking about. Damaged properties. If such damage occurs, the structure must be repaired or removed within 1 year of written notice. If unresolved, removal may proceed at the owner's expense following a grace period approved by acts or majority vote of assigned property owners present at a properly noticed meeting. If the owner is absent or unwilling to act, the acts community may coordinate removal with costs billed to the owner or deducted from escrow for future disbursements. 2.5, recreational vehicles, RVs. Up to 2 RVs are allowed on the property. They must be kept in good condition and do not count toward the 1,800 square foot construction requirement. This is to prevent the formation of RV parks or long-term mobile setups. Exception. Additional RVs may be permitted temporarily during major emergencies, natural disasters, displacement, etc., for friends or family only, and may not be used for income generation or rentals. So you're not going to be taking advantage of the hurricane by saying, now that I've got a hurricane, now I'm going to use the fact that there's an exception to create an RV park. That's not what we're doing over here. It's for your friends and families to be welcome to come in. 2.6, barn dominiums and new construction standards. We're all for barn-style homes as long as they're built to real standards, not shortcuts. Barn dominiums are permitted if professionally constructed with structurally sound materials. Reclaimed or recycled materials may be used if they are in good condition and installed to professional standards. All construction must conform to AIA, American Institute of Architects Building and Contract Standards, UBC, Universal Building Code, and or ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines where applicable. Moved-in or disassembled buildings are not allowed without written approval from ACTS. Let's go to Section 3, prohibited uses. Not everything belongs out here. These rules protect the land, the people, and the purpose of acts. No portion of the property may be used for the following purposes, activities, or operations unless specifically approved in writing by acts and or a majority vote over 75% of signed property owners present at a properly noticed meeting. 3.1, nuisance and hazardous activities are prohibited. Any use that is unlawful or that creates a nuisance by reason of odor, gas, fumes, dust, smoke, noise, pollution, or vibration is strictly prohibited. This includes any activity that poses an excessive risk of fire, explosion, or that otherwise threatens the peace, health, safety, or property value of nearby owners. For example, a absolutely massive, insane fireworks show that poses a risk to start a fire throughout all of the Texas property. That would be something that would be prohibited. 3.2, waste disposal and burning. This land is not to be used as a dump for trash, waste, or unwanted debris of any kind. The dumping, disposal, incineration, or open reduction of garbage, sewage, or refuse is strictly prohibited on the property. Controlled burning of household trash is permitted only in compliance with all applicable burn regulations issued by the local fire authority and must not produce nuisance, smoke, odor, or hazard to neighboring properties. Note, burning natural brush or wood piles, for example, fallen limbs or cleared timber, is permitted for land maintenance provided it is done safely and in accordance with local rules. 3.3, hazardous chemicals and contaminants. The dumping, disposal, incineration, or reduction of pharmaceutical drugs, synthetic detergents, or fragrances, fluoride, hazardous chemical substances, or concentrated heavy metals is strictly prohibited on the property. This includes any material known to contaminate soil, water, air, or livestock, or that could compromise the regenerative nature of the land. 3.4, petroleum and fossil fuel extraction operations. The drilling, refining, storage, or processing of petroleum, crude oil, natural gas, or any of their byproducts is strictly prohibited on the property. This includes all extraction-related activities, equipment, and infrastructure associated with oil, gas, diesel, kerosene, and other hydrocarbon-based fuels. 3.5, junkyards and salvage operations are prohibited. The operation or maintenance of a junkyard, scrap metal yard, or auto salvage yard is strictly prohibited on the property. This includes the accumulation of derelict vehicles, uncontained scrap, or large-scale discarded materials in a way that creates visual blight or safety concerns. However, personal use, auto workshops, art studios, or homestead projects involving multiple vehicles or metal materials are permitted, provided they are organized, well-maintained, and an aid to the community. 3.6, industrial facilities. The operation of industrial facilities is strictly prohibited. This includes, but is not limited to, heavy manufacturing, fabrication plants, and testing or research facilities involving large-scale machinery, chemicals, or continuous commercial output. The property may not be used for any activity that resembles or supports industrial zoning. 3.7, resale-based commercial businesses, aka flea markets. The property may not be used for the operation of resale or liquidation-based commercial businesses, including but not limited to pawn shops, flea markets, bankruptcy sales, fire sales, and auction-based operations. These types of high turnover retail or liquidation-based operations often bring clutter, increased traffic, and a commercial tone that is incompatible with the peaceful, residential, agricultural nature of the Axe community and are therefore strictly prohibited. However, occasional garage sales, farm stand events, or community market days are permitted, provided they are temporary, well-kept, and do not operate as permanent or high-volume retail businesses. 3.8, alcohol-centered establishments. The property may not be used for the operation of any tavern, bar, nightclub, discotheque, or other establishment where alcoholic beverages are sold or served for on-premises consumption. These uses are incompatible with the community's purpose and may contribute to noise, late-night activity, crime, and traffic that disrupts the residential agricultural environment. Important exception. Weddings do not count against this prohibition, though they do serve alcohol. The encouragement of wine at weddings is demonstrated by Jesus Christ himself. Therefore, it's A-okay. 3.9, sexually oriented businesses. The property may not be used for any sexually oriented business, including but not limited to adult bookstores, establishments that sell, rent, display, or exhibit pornographic materials, strip clubs, adult theaters, or any commercial venture involving sexually explicit content or entertainment. These uses are strictly prohibited as they are incompatible with the family-centered, faith-aligned, and community-oriented nature of the Axe environment. 3.10, synthetic chemicals and fertilizers. The application, dumping, or use of synthetic pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, fertilizers, or other biocides is strictly prohibited on any portion of the property. This includes, but is not limited to, products such as Roundup, Miracle-Gro, or any other chemical compound designed to kill or artificially stimulate plant growth through synthetic means. Exception: naturally occurring biomaterials such as compost tea, fish emulsions, seaweed blends, algae-based sprays, and other organic regenerative inputs are allowed and encouraged, provided they do not contaminate shared water sources or neighboring parcels. Any synthetic substance not explicitly permitted must receive prior written approval from Axe and neighboring families before use. 3.11, monocropping and excessive tillage. The practice of monocropping, defined as growing a single annual crop variety in the same field for consecutive seasons, is strictly prohibited on the property. Excessive or repeated tillage of the soil is also prohibited, except when used to establish a no-till garden bed or during the initial preparation of land for regenerative use. Owners are encouraged to grow diverse crops together using techniques aligned with the principles of permaculture, companion planting, and regenerative agriculture in order to build soil health, increase biodiversity, and maintain ecological balance. 3.12, genetically modified organisms, GMOs. The cultivation or propagation of genetically modified organisms, GMOs, is strictly prohibited on the property. This includes genetically engineered seeds, plants, or organisms developed through laboratory-based gene modification, splicing, or transgenic methods. Only heirloom, open pollinated, or naturally hybridized plant varieties may be used to maintain ecological integrity and food sovereignty within the axe community. This is extra important because the introduction of GMOs onto your land may actually have those GMOs fly through the wind onto the land of your neighbors. And in doing that, the companies who own the genetics and have the patents of the genetics in those GMOs allows those companies to enter into the land of your neighbors and allows those companies to destroy your neighbors' crops. That is a terrible harm done unto your neighbors. 3.13, cannabis production for large-scale commercial purposes. The property may not be used as a commercial cannabis grow operation or as a primary site for the production or sale of marijuana products. Personal cultivation for family or individual use is permitted, and small-scale growing for occasional sale, trade, or gifting is acceptable, provided it remains clearly secondary to the primary residential or agricultural purpose of the land. Here we can see an example of marijuana plants and hemp plants that are grown in a biodiverse permaculture style fashion that integrates with other forms of plants, not a giant monocrop. This restriction exists to prevent hidden high volume grow operations that would compromise the integrity, safety, and intended use of the axe community. Many grow operations may be legal now, however, they are still controlled by the cartel. So obviously, the cartels that already had money by the time that a lot of marijuana operations became legalized, they just took their money from when it was illegal and just legalized it. So we don't want to invite those sorts of people into the community and into the neighborhood. 3.14, truck fleets. The land may not be used as a truck yard, fleet depot, or commercial distribution hub. Limited parking or storage of large vehicles such as tractor trailers, 18-wheelers, or similar heavy-duty trucks is permitted only if directly related to the owner's personal livelihood or career. For example, an owner-operator with one rig. This allowance is not to be used as a cover for operating a multi-vehicle logistics, freight, or transport business from the property. Bottom line, a truck in the driveway is fine. A fleet in the field is not. 3.15, storage containers and container construction. Storage containers are permitted, but they must be situated behind the primary residence, not visible from the main road, and maintained in good condition to prevent becoming a visual nuisance. Large, rusted, or brightly colored containers that sit unused or visibly distract from the natural landscape with graffiti and other forms of unsightly blight are not permitted. Container homes and structures built using shipping containers are allowed, provided they are professionally constructed, visually cohesive, and meet the standards set forth in Section 2, Structures and Buildings. For example, I've seen shipping container homes, I've seen shipping container pools, I've seen shipping container shooting ranges. All of those are totally okay. Bottom line, use containers wisely. Hide them if it's just for the standard storage use. Maintain them and build with beauty in mind, but don't let them rust, rot, and run down in front of everyone. 3.16, EMF emitting infrastructure. The operation or installation of cell phone towers, high voltage power lines, or any equipment that emits or projects high frequency electromagnetic fields is strictly prohibited on the property. This restriction does not apply to low emission personal devices such as Wi-Fi routers, ham radios, Starlink kits, or other standard household equipment used within a residential setting. The purpose of this restriction is to preserve the natural environment, reduce unnecessary EMF exposure, and maintain the peaceful character of the axe community without limiting communication. So, for example, I have here a photo of a ham radio for communication. That is perfectly okay, and it goes with the nature of axe, especially for emergencies. Bottom line, Wi-Fi in your house is fine. A cell tower next to my kids, not happening. 317. Well water, rainwater catchment, and shared water systems are encouraged. Personal well water systems and rainwater catchment systems are fully permitted and encouraged on the property, provided they are designed and operated in ways that protect the integrity of the land and community. Personal water systems. Owners may drill private wells for personal household and agricultural use, install rainwater harvesting systems for home, garden, or livestock needs, use ponds or natural water catchment basements for irrigation and homesteading purposes. All personal water systems must comply with applicable state and local water laws, avoid contamination of shared groundwater or neighboring properties, and be constructed and maintained in a manner that is visually appropriate to the rural natural environment. A note on shared wells and water agreements. Shared wells between neighboring properties are allowed and encouraged for the mutual benefit, provided that a written agreement is established between participating owners outlining fair access, maintenance responsibilities, and usage limits. Shared water usage is limited to personal, residential, and agricultural purposes, and no well is used to establish a commercial water distribution business or high-volume water extraction operation without prior written approval from ACTS and 75% community consent. Important. Shared water well agreements are considered private covenants between owners and do not override these deed restrictions unless formally approved. Now let's talk about prohibited water activities. Wells, rainwater catchment systems, or water infrastructure may not be used to establish commercial sales, for-profit bottling, distribution businesses, or other industrial-scale water operations. No mass collection or extraction of water for off-property resale or third-party use is permitted. Bottom line, water is a gift to steward, not exploit. Personal use is celebrated. Commercial exploitation is prohibited. 3.18. Commercial wind turbines. The property may not be used to host large-scale or commercial wind energy projects. We don't want to look like this on our land. The installation of multiple large wind turbines or the creation of wind farms is strictly prohibited unless otherwise approved in writing by ACTS for the specific purpose of providing energy local to ACTS property owners. Small residential turbines are allowed for personal power generation provided they are visually discrete, non-disruptive to neighboring parcels, and not harmful to local bird populations. This restriction ensures the landscape is preserved and the community remains free from industrial-scale wind infrastructure while still allowing for off-grid energy independence and ACTS-aligned shared solutions. Here's an example of a vertical wind turbine offered by our friends at Atlas Survival Shelters. We actually feature them as a bunker option. This is totally viable. This is totally okay. So in fact, it's even encouraged for you to have something like this. Bottom line, generate your own power, but don't turn the land into a wind factory. 319, chlorinated swimming pools. The installation or operation of chlorinated or chemically treated swimming pools is prohibited on the property. Only saltwater, UV treated, and or natural swimming pools are permitted. These are systems that use means other than chlorine to maintain cleanliness. Natural pools, for example, use gravel beds, aquatic plants, and biological filtration to maintain water quality without chlorine, bromine, or synthetic chemical treatments. These pools are often referred to as chemical-free swimming ponds or eco-pools and function by mimicking the natural water cleansing processes found in lakes and wetlands. You can see, for example, the lily pads that help clean out the water in this natural pool. This restriction is in place to prevent chemical seepage into soil and groundwater, protect local biodiversity, and uphold the ACTS community's commitment to regenerative land stewardship. Bottom line, swim in something that won't kill your soil. Nature-based pools only, chemical tubs don't belong here. 320, light pollution and high-intensity outdoor lighting. We preserve the night sky. No portion of the property may be used in a way that creates excessive light pollution or disrupts the nature and the natural darkness of the area. If you're wondering what light pollution is, we can see in this photo that when you're closer to the city, do you notice how there's a glow in the sky? And because of the glow, you cannot see the dots of all the stars. At pretty much all of the Axe properties that we develop, we always tend to start out with a sky that looks a lot like this, where you can see all of the stars, and it's gorgeous. For example, our California property is deemed a dark sky property, and so we want to keep that dark sky. It's magical, and it's something that is going away. If we look at the country and look at what light pollution has resulted in, we could see the creep that has gone from the late 50s all the way till now in 2025. So we have the opportunity with these properties to preserve some of the last few dark skies in the entire United States of America and eventually throughout the entire world. The use of floodlights, stadium lights, or other high-intensity exterior lighting is prohibited, except during emergency situations, scheduled events, or active construction, and only with advance notice to Axe and adjacent neighbors when appropriate. So let's say there's a situation where a hurricane comes in and you need to use floodlights in order to repair the damage to one of the walls of your house because everything is flooding inwards. That's not a situation where, oh my gosh, you're using floodlights, how dare you? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just everyday use for no reason, not covering up the lights. All non-emergency lighting must be motion activated or timer controlled, be downward facing to minimize sky glow, be turned off after 11 p.m. unless approved in writing by Axe or the surrounding neighbors. So, for example, this right here, that is unacceptable because it's just unshielded light that just goes everywhere. That's what creates light pollution. But when you put a cone over the light goes downward, and this minimizes the light pollution. Low voltage uplighting for landscaping, trees, or architectural accents is permitted, provided it does not create excessive ambient glow or become a visual nuisance to neighboring properties. In this example, we see here, this is actually downward lighting, and then this is just lighting for the pathway. And if you have uplighting for the trees, I'm talking about just small little lights that go right onto the tree provides a cone that prevents the light pollution. So bottom line, let the stars speak, keep your lights low, soft, and respectful of the dark sky. We are one of the few people on the planet that get to enjoy this. 321, generator noise limitations. Generators are permitted on the property, but must be properly soundproofed, well-maintained, and not exceed 90 decibels at the property line during operation at 100% load. Any generator that creates sustained noise above this threshold is subject to restriction or removal. Bottom line, keep your power running, just don't make the whole valley hear it. 322, prohibition on idolatrous or occult structures. The property may not be used to build, install, or maintain idolatrous, occultic, or spiritually defiling structures, including but not limited to statues or shrines dedicated to false gods or demonic entities, spirit portals or occult altars, Freemasonic, Illuminati, or other hidden society symbols prominently displayed, temples of false religions intended for public worship or recruitment. For example, Aleister Crowley once did a black magic ritual right next to the Lake Ness, and he left that portal open. This led to many entities coming in and coming through. That's the type of thing that we do not want to do. Why? Why do we have this specifically? Again, the Axe community is dedicated to honoring God alone and preserving spiritual purity on the land. The land belongs to the Lord and is stewarded in His name. The establishment of spirit portals, idolatrous monuments, or occult structures is forbidden, as it invites spiritual harm and violates the protection owed to innocent families and children within the community who bought in to avoid such obstruction. So again, when we talk about the non-aggression principle and not initiating harm, we're not just talking about physical harm or mental harm. We're also talking about spiritual harm, and that's what these types of structures can do. Bottom line, this is not the place to practice witchcraft or occultism. Find somewhere else for that nonsense. 323, free-for-all gunfire zones or open range style shooting. The property may not be used as a commercial skeet, trap, or rifle range that involves the open, repeated, or sustained discharge of firearms in a way that causes chemical discharge from ammunition, disruptive noise or nuisance to neighboring parcels, or disruptive noise or nuisance to neighboring parcels. This includes unstructured, casual use by rotating guests for unscheduled, high-volume shooting, especially when conducted in open areas and exceeding ACT's community sound guidelines. Permitted activities: structured firearm training, private instruction, controlled marksmanship events, for example, rifleman schools or preparedness courses. These activities are allowed provided they are conducted with safety, intentionality, and respect for community noise thresholds. Bottom line, firearms are fine, free-for-alls are not. Shoot with safety, skill, and sound-mindedness. 324, factory farming and poor animal welfare. Livestock, poultry, horses, and pets are allowed on the property, provided that all animals are kept in proper and humane conditions and in compliance with applicable government regulations. Proper conditions means animals may not be factory farmed, inhumanely confined in cages, tied down or excessively chained, kept indoors or in small paddocks where they are forced to wallow in their own waste or remain in unsanitary conditions. The ACT's community supports regenerative, rotational, pasture-based animal husbandry, and this restriction ensures that livestock are raised in a way that aligns with the land's purpose and the well-being of both animals and neighbors. Bottom line, animals deserve dignity. Raise them the way God designed on pasture, not in prison. 325, permanent porta potties. Permanent use of external portable toilets, such as plastic porta potties, is strictly prohibited on the property. Setting up a self-contained, professionally built toilet system, for example, a composting toilet in a bathhouse or an outhouse with sanitary plumbing, is permitted, provided the structure is architecturally integrated and visually appropriate to the residential agricultural character of the community. For example, structures such as the bathroom bunkie are allowed if built to good standards. Note, temporary use of porta-can toilets is allowed during events and active construction projects and may remain on the property for up to 60 days following project completion. This restriction is intended to prevent unsightly, unsanitary, or poorly maintained portable toilets from becoming permanent fixtures on the land. For example, this is a photo taken from this past Easter here in Panoplia, and there was a porta potty there for the event. That was totally okay. That's not a big deal if they have a porta potty for a nice Easter Sunday for all the families. Bottom line, porta potties are for projects, not permanent fixtures. Build it right or take it down. 326, trash, debris, and visual blight. No property or portion of any property shall be used as a dumping ground for rubbish, trash, hazardous materials, or waste of any kind. All properties must be kept clean, orderly, and free from visible clutter, including but not limited to boxes, loose trash, debris, and construction remnants, abandoned or non-functioning equipment, unsightly piles of discarded materials. For example, let's say you have a 4th of July weekend and your parcel looks like this after the 4th of July weekend. Don't just leave it looking like this. Don't just leave it. That stuff's going to blow over. That stuff is going to seep into the ground. Pick it up. Or we'll send someone in to go pick it up for you. Refrigerators, washing machines, and other large appliances may not be stored or placed outdoors where they are visible from any public or private road. And see this pile of rusted out stuff that's just out there, HVAC equipment and other nonsense that nobody's using for years. That's the type of thing we don't want to accumulate. Here's an extra important one. Aluminum foil, reflective insulation, or similar materials may not be used as window coverings on any front-facing or side windows visible from a road or neighboring property. This seems petty, but it is by far the single fastest way to lower property value. Just put one house up with this type of reflective lighting on the window, instantly devalues the property, instantly makes it look like an awful neighborhood. This restriction exists to maintain the beauty, dignity, and long-term property value of the ACT's community. If this is violated and requests ignored, ACT's community members reserve the right to remove the visible junk from the property. Bottom line, this isn't the city dump. Keep your land clean, your stuff orderly, and your junk out of sight. 327, community noise limitations. To preserve peace, privacy, and the residential quality of life, the following noise standards apply throughout the ACT's community. Maximum noise levels at the property line. Daytime hours, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. No activity or event on the property may produce sustained noise that exceeds 90 decibels measured at the property line for more than 5 continuous minutes. Nighttime hours, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. A stricter limit of 75 decibels applies during nighttime hours in consideration of rest, sleep, and quiet enjoyment. If it would wake a sleeping child from 3 acres away, it probably violates this rule. Temporary exceptions may be granted for scheduled community events, scheduled firearm training sessions, active construction projects, daytime only, emergency operations requiring equipment, respectful use of farm equipment, tractors, chainsaws, or dirt bikes. All exceptions must be temporary, respectful, and pre-communicated where possible. To fully understand what we're talking about here when we talk about decibels, what most people don't understand about decibels is that sound drops by 6 decibels every time distance doubles. A noise source producing 110 to 115 decibels at the origin would register 90 decibels at the neighbor's line 300 feet away. So for context, a typical conversation in a restaurant or an office might be 60 decibels. 70 decibels is a dishwasher or a shower. 80 decibels is a kitchen blender. So when we're talking about 90 decibels, we're talking about an amount of volume that is physically harmful to other people's ears. It is outrageously loud. You have to be really going crazy in order to register above that. And when we're talking about 75 decibels, that is a very loud conversation that is happening. And so if I can hear a very loud conversation that's happening when we're talking about parcels that are 5, 10, 15, 20 acres, that is incredibly loud at the source. That is louder than even a jet engine. So again, what does 90 decibels sound like at the property line? That's a gas-powered lawnmower or tractor up close. That's a chainsaw or a leaf blower at 25 to 50 feet. That's a dirt bike or an ATV at medium range, or a dog barking at full volume from 10 to 20 feet away. So we're just saying, hey, you can have up to those things, but more than that, when you're approaching a neighbor and you're more than a lawnmower at the side of the property line, that's when we're talking about an issue. Just move the activity inwards. So again, what about dogs and animals? Remember, natural animal sounds, barking, mooing, crowing, are expected and acceptable. However, sustained barking for long periods, especially close to a property line, may exceed the allowed limits and disturb neighbors. So train your animals. Don't let them become everyone else's alarm clock. Also, when it comes to dirt bikes, ATVs, or tools, motorized recreation and rural work tools are permitted when used respectfully. Riding a dirt bike across your land occasionally during the day is fine. Revving laps next to your neighbor's bedroom bedroom window for an hour, not fine. Chainsaws, tractors, and farm gear are part of the lifestyle, but don't run them unnecessarily near someone's porch all day. Golden rule: would the same noise disturb your peace? Bottom line, respect your neighbor's peace. Keep the loud stuff brief or far from the property line, or find an alternative. For example, one of our property owners simply uses an electric dirt bike that goes just as fast as any other type of dirt bike. 328, surveillance, drones, and voyeurism prohibition. To preserve the privacy, security, and dignity of all property owners within the ACT's community, the following activities are strictly prohibited without prior written consent from ACT's leadership and, where appropriate, the affected property owners. Unauthorized surveillance, the use of cameras, listening devices, monitoring equipment, or any technology intended to observe, record, or intercept private activities without clear consent is strictly prohibited. Unauthorized drone use, flying drones or unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, over another owner's property or shared community areas without prior permission is prohibited, regardless of whether recording is intended. Voyeurism or invasive observation, any act of spying, peeping, or unauthorized observation into another person's property, home, private activities, or personal belongings is absolutely prohibited and will result in immediate legal action and potential removal from the community. Third-party surveillance, the use of third parties, whether individuals, corporations, or agencies, or private investigators, to engage in any of the above activities on a resident's behalf is likewise prohibited. Two examples that I can think of are, again, flying drones, or another one is usage of the Ring devices to try to spy on your neighbors. I remember there's celebrities that have been caught on camera because they're walking and talking with their friends, but someone's Ring device was used to try to spread information out online. That's the type of thing that is completely unacceptable. Exception. Lawful use of personal drones solely over one's own property is permitted so long as it does not invade the privacy or quiet enjoyment of others. Bottom line, respect your neighbor's privacy. 329, exhibitionism and obscenity. While individuals are free to enjoy their property in private, public exposure, exhibitionism, or obscene conduct, whether in person or online, that is tied to or visible from within the ACTS community is strictly prohibited. Remember, this is a place where my children are raised, and I would say about 85 to 90% of all property owners have children under 5 years old, and that's what influenced them to go get their ACTS property in the first place. So when we have this restriction, we're talking about activities such as public nudity or indecent exposure visible from neighboring properties or shared community areas, hosting nudist events, clothing optional gatherings or sexually explicit public activities on one's property, engaging in lewd acts or indecent displays within view of other property owners, their families, or guests, broadcasting, filming, or distributing obscene, pornographic, or sexually explicit content, such as through platforms like OnlyFans, Pornhub, or similar services where the property or the ACTS community is depicted, identified, or implied, or using the property to create, promote, or profit from sexually explicit materials accessible to the public. I can only imagine people finding joy in disrupting a community like ours, saying, oh, look at how we've defiled land like an ACTS property. That's exactly the type of mindset that we're talking about here. So example, while a person may have full privacy within their home or behind fully screened areas, hosting a nudist colony visible to neighbors or using the property to produce or promote pornographic content would both constitute violations of this restriction. Purpose. This clause exists to protect the innocence of children, the moral dignity of the community, and the right of neighbors to live free from unwanted exposure to obscenity, whether physically or digitally. Violations of this clause may result in immediate disciplinary action, including fines, mandatory corrective exposures, and mandatory corrective measures, or termination of property rights. Remember, my family's out there. Bottom line. ACTS communities stand for family-centered living, moral order, and the preservation of modesty, both in the physical realm and the digital realm. 330, adultery and theft. The property may not be used to harbor, encourage, or facilitate acts of adultery or theft, whether openly or in secret. Adultery prohibition. No guest or property owner may pursue, initiate, or engage in sexual relationships with another person's spouse, especially within the community. Affairs, inappropriate relationships, or seduction attempts that undermine marriages and families, especially within the community, are absolutely forbidden. Why? Adultery is a direct assault on the fabric of families and a betrayal that poisons trust between neighbors. It undermines trust and therefore runs the risk of destroying entire communities. So families must be protected and marriages honored to preserve the peace and future of the land. This was true thousands of years ago, and it is true now. Theft prohibition. No resident, guest, or property owner may steal, appropriate, or wrongfully use another's property without clear permission. This includes tangible theft, for example, tools, livestock goods, and intangible theft, for example, unauthorized use of another's resources, water systems, or energy. Why? Theft breaks the bonds of neighborly trust and sows division, suspicion, and hostility, all of which rot a community from within. Historically, more intentional communities have collapsed due to adultery and theft than from any external threat. This seems like a petty restriction to add in, but again, historically, this is the number one threat. This is the biggest thing that happens. Look up all other intentional communities that might exist. This is by far one of the biggest enemies. Bottom line, in Acts, marriage is sacred and private property is sacred. Destroying either is an attack on the entire community and will not be tolerated. 331, prohibition against false witness and covetousness. No resident, guest, or property owner may bear false witness against another member of the community, falsely accuse a neighbor of wrongdoing, report, frame, or manipulate accusations, especially for personal gain, jealousy, or covetous intent. False witness prohibition. Maliciously spreading false information, falsely reporting a neighbor to Acts leadership or external authorities to harm them, fabricating grievances to try to punish, evict, or dispossess someone of their property, reputation, or rights is strictly prohibited. Historical example. During the Bolshevik Revolution, neighbors would falsely accuse one another of crimes to have them arrested so they could seize their homes and belongings. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote in the Gulag Archipelago, in our country, the lie has become not just a moral category, but a pillar of the state. This is the exact type of thing that we want to prevent at all costs. Covetousness prohibition. No property owner shall covet, scheme for, or manipulate circumstances to acquire another's home, land, animals, or possessions through deceit, fraud, or intimidation. Bottom line, healthy transactions based on mutual agreement are welcomed. Schemes born of envy are forbidden. False accusations are not merely a personal sin, they are a weapon of societal collapse. Acts communities must be built on truth, honor, and contentment, not on envy, betrayal, and falsehood. Now let's talk about responsibility for your guests. Property owners are fully responsible for the actions and conduct of their guests, family members, employees, contractors, and invitees while they are on Acts property. They are extensions of you, is how they are considered. So this responsibility includes, but is not limited to, number one, ensuring that no guest violates any Acts deeded property restrictions, community standards, or codes of conduct. Number two, addressing or correcting any violations immediately. Number three, accepting accountability for any damages, disturbances, or misconduct caused by guests. For example, a minor visits a property owner and uses a drone to peek into a neighbor's home, and so the property owner, not just the minor, will be held responsible for the violation, especially if it was done with the knowledge, negligence, or intent of the property owner. Liability mitigation. To help protect themselves and their property rights, owners are encouraged and in certain cases may be required to have their guests, contractors, or invitees sign a guest acknowledgement agreement affirming that they understand and agree to abide by Acts community rules during their stay or service period. The signature of guests and contractors serves as an additional layer of liability protection for property owners, confirming that guests were made aware of the rules and personally assumed responsibility for their conduct. Failure to prevent, address, or correct guest misconduct may result in disciplinary actions and/or legal actions against the property owner. So now let's move on to Section 4, Construction and Build Requirements. To preserve the momentum, quality, and long-term cohesion of the Acts community, the following build timelines and construction standards apply to all residential parcels. 4.1, Construction Timeline for Commencement and Completion. To maintain quality standards, aesthetic integrity, and steady development across the Acts community, all property owners must adhere to the following construction timeline. Design submission within 1 year of closing. Construction start within 2 years of design submission and approval, 3 years total from when they closed. Exterior completion within 24 months of starting construction, up to 5 years total from closing. Full project completion within 5 years of closing. Purpose. These timelines ensure properties are not left in a state of partial construction or long-term vacancy, and that each parcel contributes meaningfully to the aesthetic, functional, and community-driven vision of ACTS. Design submission within 1 year of closing. Property owners must submit a complete design or site plan to ACTS for review and approval within 1 year of closing on the property. The design must include plans for at least one primary residence or a family compound structure totaling a minimum of 1,800 square feet of conditioned, heated, and cooled living space. Construction start within 2 years of design approval. Property owners must initiate active construction based on the approved design within 2 years of receiving design approval from ACTS. Active construction means visible and continuous progress, including foundational work, framing, or major systems installation. Summary. Owners must have a design submitted within 1 year and construction underway within 2 years after the design that was submitted has been approved, resulting in approximately 3 years total from closing to construction commencement, because 1 plus 2 equals 3. Exterior completion within 24 months of starting construction. Once construction begins, the exterior of any residential building, structure, or improvement must be fully completed within 24 months of the construction start date. Fully completed means the structure must be weatherproofed, sided, roofed, and visually finalized to community standards, even if interior work continues thereafter. Full project completion within 5 years of closing. The entire residential project must be completely finished and suitable for occupancy by meeting that 1,800 square foot requirement within 5 years of the original property closing date. So, you could have a person buy their land, wait an entire year to figure out a design, then wait another entire year after that to finally start construction. So now it's been 2 years. Then they take a whole another 2 years just to finish up the exterior shell of the build. And then they can take a whole nother year to finish up the interior for that design. That is meeting the 5-year construction requirement. Or they could take a whole year for the design, take 2 years to get started with building, and then they would have another 2 years to make sure to finish up the whole entire project. That is also acceptable. Failure to meet these deadlines may result in enforcement actions, including but not limited to fines, suspension of community privileges, mandatory corrective measures, or reversion or repurchase of rights that are defined in the purchase agreements. Bottom line, in ACTS, land ownership means active stewardship, building toward a future that blesses your family and strengthens the whole community. Final timeline summary. Design submission is within 1 year of closing. Construction start is within 2 years of design approval. Exterior completion is within 24 months of construction start. And the full build completion, at least 1,800 square feet, is within 5 years of closing. Primary residence requirements. Each property must ultimately contain at least 1,800 square feet of conditioned living space, which may be satisfied as follows. Multiple structures allowed. The total 1,800 square feet may be split across multiple structures, for example, a main house plus guest cabins or bunkies. Minimum primary structure size. At least one structure must be a minimum of 900 square feet of conditioned living space. Timeline for completion. The first 900 square foot structure must be initiated within 36 months. The full 1,800 square feet total requirement must be completed and commissioned within 60 months, 5 years from the date of agreement execution. This phased flexibility allows owners to build in stages while ensuring visible, steady development across the community. 4.3, architectural flexibility with quality standards. ACTS encourages creativity and personal expression in home building, provided that all structures maintain a standard of excellence and durability, safety, and visual cohesion with the broader community. Architectural styles permitted can be very varied. A wide variety of architectural styles are welcome, including but not limited to traditional residential homes, barn dominiums, earthships, yurts, geodesic domes, log cabins, and other regenerative, natural, or alternative building methods approved by ACTS. All designs must be professionally presented and demonstrate thoughtful integration with the land and surrounding community aesthetic. Choice of contractor. Property owners are free to select any licensed contractor for their build. However, ACTS Homes is the preferred contractor as they are familiar with ACTS design standards and community requirements. Choosing an external contractor may require additional review or inspections to ensure compliance with ACTS standards. We see it all the time. When people go to outside contractors, the outside contractors have not watched a video like this, and so they start making recommendations to the property owners that have nothing to do with our deed restrictions. For example, they start having the property owners have a electrical outlet that runs out to the public grid, or they have a design that requires a typical water system that goes out to the public water system. Again, they're often in violation of the deed restriction. They have no idea about it because they're not used to family compound construction or off-grid construction, and they don't watch these videos. So that's what the issues might be with going with normal contractors, but you're allowed to go with them. DIY construction is also allowed. So do-it-yourself construction is permitted provided that finished structures meet or exceed AIA, American Institute of Architects standards, or meet an equivalent professional construction standard, ensuring durability, safety, and visual cohesion. Important note about DIY construction. ACTS accepts no liability for mistakes, errors, defects, or omissions in do-it-yourself construction projects. ACTS does not provide any warranties, guarantees, or consultations regarding do-it-yourself builds unless a separate executed consulting contract and waiver is signed prior to involvement. For example, there's a gentleman, he wants to do everything himself, but he's been emailing us for all sorts of consultations. We're not going to be consulting with him because we're not taking on the liability for his construction project on his land. It's your land. That means you are responsible for what happens on your land. Bottom line, ACTS welcomes creativity, but excellence is required. Whether you hire a contractor or build it yourself, your home must honor the vision of a strong, beautiful, and enduring community. This protects the long-term value, safety, and regenerative future of the ACTS community while encouraging personal craftsmanship and off-grid innovation. 4.4, Creative Freedom Clause. The ACTS deed restrictions are not intended to limit creativity in the color, shape, siding style, or design of homes. As long as the structure meets the required structural standards, meets the required size minimums, and follows the timelines for initiation and completion outlined above, property owners are free to create whatever style of residence they desire, whether that's a traditional farmhouse, a futuristic earthship, an artistic cob cottage, or any other creative living structure, provided it meets the Universal Building Code guidelines and specifications for commissioned residential use and adaptability. Bottom line, ACTS supports architectural diversity so long as it is safe, durable, and timely built, preserving the spirit of freedom and innovation that defines the community. 4.5, Exterior Finishing and Materials Standard. While creativity in the form of materials is encouraged, all structures must have professional quality exterior finishes upon completion. Exterior appearance. Structures must have a finished, weatherproof exterior, no exposed sheathing. Temporary construction materials such as tar paper, Tyvek wrap, foam board, or other unfinished sheathing products may not remain exposed as permanent exterior siding. Skirting required. Any raised structure must be properly skirted to conceal piers, posts, or foundations unless the design itself intentionally features finished exposed elements, for example, posts and beam designs that are architecturally submitted. Roofing standards. Roofs must be finished with durable, weather-resistant roofing materials such as standing seam metal, composite shingles, clay tiles, or approved equivalents. Bottom line, these exterior finishing standards ensure that even the most creative builds contribute to the overall beauty, resilience, and property value of the AXE community. 4.6, prohibition against permanent public grid dependency. To preserve the off-grid nature, resilience, and sovereignty of the AXE community, permanent dependency on centralized public utilities, including electric, water, or sewer grids, is prohibited for all new construction. This land is meant to operate independently, not through systems that can be shut off, surveilled, or controlled. Temporary grid use is allowed for construction only, however. Owners may temporarily connect to on-grid utilities during the initial construction phase, including running power tools or equipment, meeting inspection or financing requirements, temporary power during build-out. However, this use must be clearly intentional in nature. The final systems must be designed for off-grid self-sufficient operation. Any grid hookup must be fully removable or non-essential to the long-term functioning of the home. No forced grid expansion onto neighboring properties. Property owners may not petition, pressure, or require AXE or other property owners or third parties to extend power lines, install poles or infrastructure, or create shared access to public utilities across neighboring parcels. If a grid line isn't already on your land, you may not extend one through someone else's to get connected. Approved off-grid systems include solar panels and battery storage, rainwater catchment and well systems, composting or natural septic solutions, wind, micro hydro, or other self-reliant energy setups. All infrastructure must be built to last without dependency and in alignment with the regenerative spirit of AXE. Bottom line, you can plug in to build, but you better unplug to live. Build your systems like the grid's already gone. 5. Disclosures and community standards. To protect the safety, sovereignty, and long-term vision of the AXE community, all property owners must certify and agree to the following disclosures and standards. 5.1, criminal background disclosure. The grantor hereby certifies and agrees that he or she is not a registered sex offender and has not been convicted of a violent crime under the laws of the United States or any other nation. This disclosure exists to maintain the safety, peace, and family-centered environment of the AXE community. Any misrepresentation or failure to disclose shall be considered grounds for rescission of ownership rights and pursuit of legal remedies by AXE. 5.2, disclosure of government, secret society, and corporate affiliation. The grantor hereby certifies and agrees that he or she is not acting as an agent, informant, contractor, employee, or representative, whether overtly or covertly, for any governmental agency, domestic or foreign, for the purpose of surveillance, infiltration, disruption, or influence over the AXE community. This includes government intelligence agencies, investigative agencies, private intelligence contractors, or private contractors affiliated with any of these sorts of missions. He or she will fully disclose if at any point he or she becomes commissioned, contracted, funded, or tasked by any government entity to monitor, report on, or interfere with AXE operations or membership. He or she is not an active current member of any secret society, including but not limited to Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, Order of the Eastern Star, Shriners, Illuminati, occultism, satanic worship, or any other similar organization requiring secret oaths, concealed hierarchies, or hidden allegiances that could conflict with honest participation in the AXE community. He or she is not acting on behalf of, funded by, or representing the interests of any major corporate entity, investment fund, shell company, political group, rival developer, or private equity group whose intent is to acquire land for speculative investment, aggregate ownership through silent proxies, or infiltrate and subvert the AXE community for financial, political, or ideological purposes. Examples of prohibited entities include, but are not limited to, BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, foreign sovereign wealth funds, and their subsidiaries, affiliates, or shell entities. Failure to fully and honestly disclose any of the above affiliations prior to purchase shall constitute fraudulent misrepresentation and an immediate breach of contract. Acts reserves the right to rescission of land transfers, forfeiture of any proceeds received, civil and criminal action against any individual, and the affiliated entity found in violation of this provision which that agent represents. Violation of this disclosure requirement shall result in immediate revocation of ownership rights, immediate reversion of the deed to Acts or its assignee without need or for further consent or judicial process, loss of any investment or improvements made to the property without compensation, and swift public exposure of the violation through social media channels, official communications, and public statements to warn other members and communities against the bad actor or actors involved. Bottom line, such deceit shall be considered a direct act against the spirit, trust, and foundational purpose of the Acts community and will be treated with the utmost seriousness. Section 6, Sales, Transfers, and Dispute Resolution. 6.1, Future Buyer Acknowledgement Requirement. Any future buyer, heir, or assignee of the property or of any subdivided portion thereof must sign and accept the Acts deeded property restriction agreement prior to completing the purchase or transfer of the land. If land is titled under an LLC, trust, or other entity, the controlling interest of such entity may not be sold, transferred, or assigned to any outside party without written adherence to these deeded restrictions. This ensures that, number one, all future owners are bound by the same terms. Number two, no sale or subdivision can bypass the established community standards. And number three, the long-term vision, integrity, and protections of the Acts community are preserved. 6.2, Enforcement rights and remedies. If any person, whether an owner, occupant, or other party in possession of the property, violates or attempts to violate any provision of this deeded property restriction agreement or permits a violation of any protected real property right, then acts any individual property owner within the Acts community or any entity holding rights to nearby land previously sold by Acts may, 1, prevent or enjoin the violation through legal action, 2, seek monetary damages for harm caused, and 3, recover all court costs, legal expenses, and reasonable attorney's fees incurred in enforcing compliance. This enforcement right is intended to uphold the standards, trusts, and protections embedded in the Acts community vision without requiring Acts itself to bear the sole burden of protecting the integrity of the land and agreements. 6.3. Severability of restrictions. If any one or more of the restrictions, provisions, or requirements contained in this deeded property restriction are declared invalid, illegal, or unenforceable by judgment of any court, the remaining restrictions and provisions shall nevertheless continue in full force and effect exactly as if the invalidated portion had never been included. This ensures that the overall purpose, integrity, and enforceability of the Acts community standards remain intact even in the event of partial legal challenges. 6.4. Authority to sign. Each party signing this deeded property restriction agreement affirms and certifies that they are legally authorized to execute this agreement either in their personal capacity or on behalf of any entity, trust, or organization they represent. Their signatures shall be binding upon themselves and or any entity for which they claim authority. This clause ensures that all agreements made under this document are legally valid, enforceable, and binding on the proper parties. 6.5. Dispute resolution process, Matthew 18 model. In the spirit of biblical justice and true brotherhood, the Acts community resolves all disputes according to the direct red letters teaching of Jesus Christ in Matthew 18, 15 through 18, quoted here through the Berean Standard Bible. A brother who sins, referenced Deuteronomy 19, 15 through 21, cross-reference. If your brother sins against you, go and confront him privately. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, regard him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Following this standard, the official dispute resolution process for Acts shall be: Step 1, direct private confrontation. Step 2, bring 2 or 3 witnesses. Step 3, bring it to the Acts community. Step 4, binding arbitration or final legal action. Step 1, direct private confrontation. The offended party must first go directly and privately to the individual who has committed the violation or caused the offense. Then attempt reconciliation through honest, respectful conversation, in a conversation that is done in good faith before taking any further steps. Step 2, bring 2 or 3 witnesses. If the offender refuses to acknowledge the matter, the offended party must then bring 1 or 2 additional witnesses, fellow Acts members or leadership, to witness the confrontation and attempt to confirm and resolve the matter together. Step 3, bring it to the Acts community. If the offender still refuses correction, the matter shall be brought before a jury of the wider Acts community, convening a panel of at least 5 unbiased members selected by Acts leadership to review the matter, hear testimony, and seek a final internal resolution. Step 4, binding arbitration or final legal action. If the offender refuses to listen even to the Acts jury, the formal matter shall then proceed to formal mediation and binding arbitration under the rules of a recognized arbitration body in the property state. If arbitration fails or is deliberately obstructed, final breach of contract proceedings may be filed in a civil court located in the state where the property is situated. 6.6, order of reconciliation and enforcement. In keeping with biblical principles of justice and restoration, any violation of the deeded property restrictions shall follow the following escalating order of reconciliation and enforcement. 1, stopping the offense. 2, personal correction, just fix the problem. 3, reasonable adjustment, moving or lessening the problem. 4, community intervention, problem fixed by others at owner's expense. 5, full removal of the violation. 6, forced sale of the property. 7, foreclosure and seizure. Step 1, stopping the offense. The offending party must immediately cease the violation upon receiving written notice. Step 2, personal correction, fixing the problem. The offender must take personal responsibility to fix the violation within a reasonable time frame to be determined by Acts leadership or the community panel. Step 3, reasonable adjustment, moving or lessening the problem. If the violation cannot be fully fixed immediately, the offender must move, reduce, or mitigate the problem in good faith manner acceptable to the community while working toward full resolution. Step 4, community intervention, problem fixed by others at owner's expense. If the offender refuses or fails to fix the problem in a timely manner, Acts of the broader community may arrange for the violation to be corrected, with all costs billed directly to the offending property owner. Step 5, full removal of the violation. If the problem persists or the owner remains non-compliant, Acts reserves the right to completely remove the source of the violation. For example, demolishing unlawful structures, cleaning debris, seizing unauthorized activities. Step 6, forced sale of the property. If the owner continues to refuse reconciliation, correction, or compensation, Acts may require the property to be immediately listed for sale, with the proceeds to be distributed after the settlement of any outstanding fines, fees, or damages owed. Step 7, foreclosure and seizure. As a final step, if the owner refuses to cooperate even after a forced sale is ordered, Acts reserves the right to foreclose on the property through legal means, resulting in forfeiture of all ownership rights and improvements without compensation in order to protect the community. Bottom line, at every stage, reasonable grace and opportunity will be extended to owners to come into compliance voluntarily. However, repeated refusal to reconcile will result in progressive and final consequences to preserve the land, protect the families, and uphold the spirit of the Acts covenant. Section 7, public humiliation. In accordance with the direct teaching of Jesus Christ, Matthew 18:15-18, Berean Standard Bible, and the Golden Rule, Matthew 7:12, Berean Standard Bible, all conflicts, violations, or grievances must be addressed privately first, following the biblical process of reconciliation outlined herein. It is a direct violation of these deeded property restriction agreements for any property owner, resident, or guest to publicly shame, slander, gossip about, or post accusations, grievances, or identifying information about others on social media platforms, websites, group chats, public forums, or any other public venues before completing the full private reconciliation process as commanded by Scripture. This restriction applies both toward fellow property owners and toward Acts Decentralized Real Estate LLC or its representatives. 7.1, protection of privacy and safety. The spirit of Acts is to specifically guard families from public exposure. Many property owners have deliberately chosen to join the Axe community in order to 1. Escape surveillance, harassment, or unwanted public attention. 2. Protect their children, livelihoods, and security from external threats. And 3. Live quietly and independently without risk of being targeted. Revealing, exposing, or broadcasting grievances, even indirectly, could compromise the safety, dignity, and well-being of fellow families and may endanger lives. This could be as simple as you have a neighbor, and there are real celebrities that exist, right? You have a neighbor and you have the celebrity neighbor and you go, oh, well, such and such, he's got, here he is on TikTok. Oh, who does he think he is? He's got one of the shipping containers on his land. That could actually compromise the safety of that person and invite paparazzi and invite all sorts of bad actors onto the property, even though you're just talking about a grievance. It could be a real grievance. It could be a real thing. It's a very valid thing. But by publicly talking about that, that invites a lot of unwanted attention to each property. Bottom line, some owners maintain sensitive careers, public reputations, or heightened security needs where even disclosing their residence on an Axe property could cause personal, financial, or physical harm. 7.2, Golden Rule application. Owners are expected to remember, just as individuals would not want Axe with its large public audience to expose or shame them, Axe and every member family deserve the same protection, honor, and covering. Violating the sacred duty of privacy constitutes a direct attack on the spirit and foundation of the Axe community. 7.3, Violation consequences. Violation of this privacy standard shall constitute a material breach of the deed of property restrictions and grounds for immediate enforcement actions, including a formal warning, community mediation and reconciliation demands, fines or penalties, suspension from community benefits or voting rights, and or binding arbitration or civil legal remedies to protect the victims and the community at large. Ultimately, each Axe property is a place where privacy is protected like sacred ground. Bottom line, in Axe, we don't air grievances online before seeking reconciliation face-to-face. The Axe community exists to build something sacred, a place governed not by endless lawsuits and bureaucracy, but by biblical reconciliation, mutual accountability, and righteous stewardship under the law of God. Section 8. Amendments to deed restrictions. To preserve the integrity of the Axe vision while allowing for reasonable future adaptations. 8.1. Voting threshold for amendments. No deeded property restriction may be modified, amended, repealed, or added to without the written consent of at least 75% of the property owners, calculated based on the parcels owned, not by individuals. Example, if there are 100 parcels, 75 parcel owners must agree. Married couples or joint owners equal 1 vote for parcel, and each parcel is 1 vote. 8.2. Notice and discussion period. Proposed amendments must be circulated to all property owners in writing at least 60 days prior to any official vote. During this period, community meetings, virtual or in person, must be held to allow for discussion, clarification, and objections to be raised. What is considered a notice? Well, it's the combination of an Axe forum post, calls, texts, emails to the other property owners, and video explanations of whatever the matter might be that you want to bring up. Bottom line, the goal is not to play gotcha games with last-minute revisions. Trying to set things up where it's like, oh, we had a meeting with 5 people and we tried reaching out to you. That's not going to fly. That's not a realistic way of doing things, okay? Having a minority of people that then change everything else by having a majority within the minority is not an actual minority. We're talking about we're talking about an actual majority, okay? An actual meeting of everybody on the property. 8.3, limited scope of amendments. No amendment shall contradict the original purpose statement of this agreement, violate biblical principles outlined in Leviticus 19, Deuteronomy, or Matthew 18, fundamentally alter the agricultural residential character of the community. For example, allowing industrial facilities and casinos and strip malls just because it's easy. Any amendment that attempts to violate these conditions shall be null and void even if passed by a vote. Section 9, Emergency Exceptions Clause. In the event of a declared emergency, whether natural, civil, or societal, Axe Decentralized Real Estate and the property owners reserve the right to temporarily suspend, modify, or waive certain deeded property restrictions as necessary to protect the safety, welfare, and mission of the Axe community. 9.1. Axe's purpose in emergency preparedness. A foundational purpose of Acts properties is to serve as beacons of safety and stability during times of disruption. Each Acts community is intentionally designed to offer property owners and their extended families and friends a secure refuge when broader society faces instability, shortages, or collapse. Through thoughtful land design, resource stewardship, and shared values, Acts aims to be a shield against the uncertainty of the outside world, ensuring that families have a place to find protection, provision, and peace in times of need. The Emergency Exceptions Clause exists to strengthen that mission, allowing swift and coordinated action when it matters most without compromising the long-term vision of the community. The definition of declared emergencies. For the purposes of this agreement, a declared emergency shall mean A formal emergency declaration issued by local, state, or federal government authorities. B, a formal declaration by Acts leadership and/or property owners based on a clear and present threat to life, security, property, or access to basic necessities, including but not limited to food, water, shelter, or medical care. C, or major disruptive events. Major disruptive events including but not limited to force majeure, natural disasters, or acts of God. For example, hurricanes, floods, wildfires, earthquakes. Widespread power grid failure or extended utility outages. Civil unrest, riots, or breakdown of local law enforcement. Mass food shortages or supply chain collapse. Major economic collapse impacting access to currency, banking, or essential goods. Pandemic or biological threats disrupting normal movement, supply chains, or essential services, acts of war, domestic terrorism, or invasion, EMP events or significant cyber attacks impacting infrastructure, government overreach threatening property rights, freedom of movement, or personal security, or any other widespread societal breakdown or credible existential threat evident to a reasonable group of persons exercising prudent judgment. 9.2. Scope of emergency exceptions. During an exceptional emergency, the following types of flexibility may be exercised. Temporary lodging or shelter accommodations beyond normal limits. Temporary parking of additional RVs, vehicles, or equipment to assist displaced families. Temporary construction of emergency structures, for example, tents, bunkhouses, food storage areas. Temporary use of outdoor lighting, generators, or sound amplification necessary for safety, security, or relief efforts. Temporary gathering or assembly activities that exceed normal thresholds to organize relief, worship, or protection. Alternative means of collecting resources such as gas, water, and energy. These emergency exceptions are only intended for the preservation of life, dignity, and community stability during extraordinary circumstances. 9.3. Declaration and oversight. Emergency exceptions may only be enacted by written declaration of Acts leadership or over 75% vote of an assembled Acts property owners meeting convened for the purposes of addressing the emergency. Once enacted, exceptions will be reviewed monthly until the emergency is resolved and rolled back promptly when conditions stabilized. At no point are we to use emergency situations to try to make a free-for-all on the deed restrictions. 9.4. Golden rule preservation. Even in emergencies, all actions taken under this clause must respect the dignity of all families, preserve the spirit of neighborly love, honor, and privacy, and avoid permanent alterations to the community standards unless formally ratified post-emergency. The spirit of acts is to provide a true safe haven, especially when the outside world falls apart. Emergency exceptions exist not to undermine the community standards, but to uphold them under pressure, ensuring that Acts remains a refuge for its families in times of need. Section 10. Legacy and inheritance. To preserve the multi-generational vision and mission of the Acts community, all properties within the Acts system are intended to be stewarded as family legacies, not flipped as commodities or lost due to confusion in estate planning. 10.1. Right of inheritance. Each property owner has the right to pass down their land to biological or adopted children, grandchildren, spouse or life partner, a designated heir named in a will or trust, or another friend, family member, or individual who has a legitimate personal or spiritual connection to the owner. All heirs must sign and agree to the Acts deeded property restriction agreement before the transfer is complete. If an heir chooses not to accept inheritance, the property must first be offered for private purchase to existing Acts families at a fair market value prior to any external sale. 10.2. Family trust and homestead protections. Owners are encouraged to place their land within a family trust, a private ministry trust, or a homestead covenant agreement to protect the land from probate, court interference, unwanted external claims, or accidental sale through estate confusion. ACTS offers educational resources and templates to help owners structure long-term protection for their land. 10.3. No forced liquidation of inherited parcels. Property owners are encouraged to name someone to inherit their property before their passing. But if a property owner passes away without a will or formal heir, ACTS and neighboring property owners shall first make reasonable efforts to locate surviving family, then offer the parcel to existing ACTS families at cost, or hold the land in stewardship trust until a qualified family can receive it. No ACTS property shall ever be liquidated to the open market by default. Every effort will be made to keep the land within the ACTS vision and community. 10.4. Legacy clause intent. The long-term goal of ACTS is to see children raised on the land become its future stewards, generations remain connected through family compounds and shared purpose, no family loses their inheritance due to lack of paperwork, planning, or spiritual foresight. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Proverbs 13:22. Section 11. Ranch Hand League Grazing Access License. 11.1. Scope of access. This license permits ACTS-authorized Ranch Hand League members to walk through portions of any property as needed to move livestock between paddocks, manage rotational grazing systems, check fencing, water, or animal health, perform regenerative land stewardship tasks tied directly to grazing. Access shall be conducted respectfully on foot or by lightweight utility vehicles, for example, side-by-side small tractors, only when necessary for grazing operations. 11.2. Limitations of access. This access is not a full public easement, permission for general recreational use, permission for unaccompanied or non-mission related entry. Entry is strictly limited to livestock management activities under ACTS authorization. Vehicles must stay on designated grazing lanes or natural paths wherever feasible unless livestock handling requires otherwise. Non-assignment clause. This grazing access license is non-transferable, non-assignable, and does not create any recorded or permanent easement on the property title. 11.3. Notice and respect for privacy. Whenever possible, the Ranch Hand League members shall provide notice before entering a parcel, respect the privacy, peace, and security of residents, and take the most direct and unobtrusive route needed to complete their grazing task. In urgent situations, for example, on animal escapes, emergency repairs, prior notice may be waived, but post-event notification must be provided. 11.4. Liability protections. Property owners shall not be held liable for injuries sustained by the Ranch Hand League members while performing grazing activities, damage caused by normal grazing operations under ACTS supervision. Ranch Hand League members are covered under ACTS operational insurance and assume all personal risk associated with grazing-related access. 11.5. Spirit of cooperation. The spirit of this grazing access license is to maintain healthy rotational grazing across ACTS properties, to build regenerative soil and support community-wide food security, and to respect property owners' rights while ensuring the land remains a thriving living system. Owners are encouraged but not required to participate directly in grazing operations. And that's it. We have now made it through the entirety of the ACTS deed restrictions. If you'd like to learn more about how you can get started with ACTS, you can look in the description down below to visit our website and go to our forum where we have online courses about everything we do at ACTS Decentralized Real Estate. My name is CJ Vesuday. I'm the CEO of ACTS Decentralized Real Estate, and thank you so much for making it all the way through the ACTS deeded property restrictions agreement.